Hey everybody, Mr. Harvey here. Let's get into chapter 21 and the Cold War. So chapter 21, in this last chapter, the last major chapter for this class, is going to be talking about the Cold War. We're going to talk about decolonization, this new modern world order, a modern Europe, and how it's going to play a part within the modern world. And then we're going to end talking a little bit about radical Islam and the part that it plays in shaping the world. So let's get into it, okay? Here's a picture from decolonization. Decolonization is going to be a huge part of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s as we see Europe and its influence around the world start to recede. In the 1800s, chapter 17, we're talking about that new imperialism when Europe was really reaching the apex of its power around the world in Africa, in Asia, still influencing some parts of the Americas. But we in the 1950s and 1960s and 70s, in a post World War II era, we start to see that influence recede, and we start to see new nations emerge, especially in Africa and in Asia and Europe's these global empires start to recede. And obviously one of the biggest empires that's going to recede is the British Empire, and we see here the statue of Queen Victoria being removed. Okay. Now, 1945 to the 1990s is really the major event that's going on is the Cold War. And the Cold War is fascinating, and it really fascinates me because my parents lived through it. My dad was born in 1944, February 29th, he's a leap year baby. And my mom was born in 1950, and it's really interesting talking to them about this era because this is an era of where the world could literally be blown up at any moment. My mom, when she was going to school, she didn't really have earthquake drills. She had nuclear drills, nuclear bomb drills, where they would hide under their desk if a nuclear bomb was going to drop. I don't know how much the desk would, protect you from a nuclear bomb, but that's kind of what they did in school. But this era from 1945 to the early 1990s is considered the Cold War era. It was just this period of time where the world was just at the edge of nuclear war, a nuclear holocaust, where the whole entire world could be destroyed. Now, there's no beginning, specific beginning and end date to the Cold War. It starts to begin with the tensions of the Allies and the Soviet Union after Germany has been defeated, and we start to see the Soviet Union collapse in the late 1980s, early 1990s. The Berlin Wall will fall in the late 1980s, around the time when Harv was born. A coincidence? I think not, okay? And we start to see eventually the Soviet Union fall and the completion of that fall in the early 1990s. Okay, so the Cold War, ladies and gentlemen, was this ideological clash between the new two superpowers of the world. So a defining feature of this post-World War II world is that there are two superpowers. You have the United States and the Soviet Union, and they could not be any more different. You have the United States, which is capitalist and democratic, and you have the Soviet Union, which is communist and totalitarian. And this is an ideological clash between the two, and it's a Cold War. They're going to be fighting each other more indirectly, because obviously, if they fight each other directly, it could lead to nuclear holocaust, nuclear destruction. Okay. Also occurring during this time, like I said before, decolonization from the European empires, and we're going to see Africa and the Middle East really start to go through their own struggles as they find themselves, as we have new nations, new countries that are kind of born with the European empires, receding. Okay, so the Cold War, ladies and gentlemen, is the defining feature of chapter 21. It is this ideological geographic struggle between the United States and its allies. It's predominantly called the West. Okay, and the USSR and its allies during a post-World War II. Okay, it's going to be lasting from at the end of World War II. So this is something that's really similar, ladies and gentlemen, to World War I and World War II and the Cold War. They're all linked. Okay, the World War I, ladies and gentlemen, remember the ending of that war is going to facilitate with the Treaty of Versailles World War II. And, okay, very similarly, the end of World War II is going to facilitate yet another war, the Cold War. Okay, and this Cold War is going to last until 1991, 1990 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. And we see the collapse of the Soviet Union, and we'll talk about that over. It occurs over a couple years. It's not just like one day the Soviet Union just collapses. No, it's a gradual process that will occur over a period of years. Okay, let's talk about our causes. All right, the big cause are the differing ideologies between the two superpowers. Okay, you have the USA, like I said, capitalistic, democratic. The Soviet Union, which is communist, and it's a dictatorship. It's totalitarian. And each country, each leader, Truman and Stalin, and we're going to see this is occurring over, roughly a 40, 50-year period. So you're going to see multiple presidents, multiple leaders. But they both want to spread their influence and kind of contain the other country. And we'll get into what containment is, okay? But both countries wanted to spread their style of governing and their economic style. So the United States is going to want to spread democracy, capitalism. Soviet Union wants to spread communism, totalitarianism. So they each are going to fight each other because they want to spread their ideologies. That's the big one that we need to know. Again, and this is so similar to World War I and World War II. The failure of these post-war conferences, these conferences where all these countries get together to figure out the world and make it a better place. Well, it's going to be a big failure. Okay, so a huge failure was that the West, the United States, Great Britain could not come to an agreement with the Soviet Union on free elections. Okay, and remember that Stalin is going to say free elections with Roosevelt, but then go psych, no free elections. Okay, and to be honest, you really can't blame Stalin for this. One of the reasons why Stalin is not going to allow for free elections in Eastern Europe is because Russia and the Soviet Union have been invaded. How many times? I think 3 or 4 times since Napoleon. Let's count it. Okay, Napoleon invaded them. They were invaded during the Crimean War, World War I, and World War II. 4 times since the early 1800s. Okay, so we're going to see the Soviets, they don't want to have free elections in the East, and they're going to kind of create this buffer zone with Poland, with Austria, with the new Czech country. I believe it's Czechoslovakia, or it's the Czech Republic. But they want to create this buffer in Eastern Europe to very similar to those buffer states after the Congress of Vienna. With Napoleon to keep, these Western countries at bay because they keep invading them. And so that's what Stalin wants, is he wants a buffer, okay, to protect from future invasions. So we're going to see the failure of these post-war conferences. The Soviets are going to be expanding into Western Europe, and that's going to make Great Britain very nervous, France very nervous, and especially the United States very nervous. Now, the United States initially is not going to stop the Soviet power grab in Eastern Europe. And a big reason why is because Eisenhower, many of the generals, except for Patton, and we never, and this lecture is being recorded in 2020, we never got to really talk about General Patton in World War II because our class didn't go up to the Cold War. But some generals in the United States Army, right after World War II was over, they knew that there was going to be a fight coming with the Soviets, and they were ready to start World War III the next day. And that was General Patton. But many of the military commanders, especially Eisenhower, the Russians had suffered so much during World War II. I believe 20 million soldiers were killed. I believe some historians put it to the estimate that 50 million Russians were killed altogether in World War II. So that the West is going to let the Soviets take Berlin and progress in Eastern Europe and really not fight them on it. Well, because the Soviets had gained that ground with their blood, and so and the United States respected that, and many Western leaders respected that. But once they had that territory, they were not going to give it back so easily. And Stalin, remember, Stalin promised free elections, but then he was like, no. Okay? Now, this is really important for the context of the class, is that there's a new role for the United States. Okay? The United States is now one of two superpowers, okay? And it is now going to kind of take over a lot of the power that used to be kind of reserved for France or Britain. And a good example of this is the Navy. Okay, Britain, with decolonization, suffering so much from World War II, and losing its empire, Great Britain is going to really take a step back in terms of its traditional power as a military power. And that role is going to go to the United States. So, for example, we're going to see the British Navy be reduced significantly. That's a big change. Great Britain has ruled the seas from 1588 Spanish Armada all the way until the end of World War II. They had a huge navy, but with decolonization and them losing a ton of money, tons of markets for their economy, they're simply not going to be able to afford having this gigantic navy and gigantic military, and it's going to be the United States who is really going to serve as their protector militarily. Okay? And we're going to see the United States start to intervene in the world on a larger and more unprecedented scale. We're going to see the United States really step to the forefront of European politics and world politics. And so the United States, we've been alluding to the United States ever since the Enlightenment, when we saw the Enlightenment in action in the United States. The United States, slowly taking more and more of a role and played a part in Europe, right? We saw a huge step forward in World War I, and then obviously in World War II. Now the United States is really kind of serving as the protector for Europe against Eastern Soviet aggression, and that's a brand new role for the United States. Okay, now early on in the Cold War, right after World War II ends, the partition of Germany. So Germany, we saw Germany be united in the late 1800s with OVB. I mean, wow, his worst fears have been realized. Not only did Germany lose World War I, but they are going to lose World War II and be split into two countries. So they now are divided again. Okay? And so we are going to see the victors of World War II, the Soviet Union, France, Britain, and the United States, going to divide up Germany between themselves. Okay? Each are also going to divide up parts of Berlin, the capital, that is in the east, which is going to be all controlled by the Soviets. Okay, so they are controlling different sections of Germany, okay, and our capitalist, democratic countries are controlling the West. The USSR, where Berlin falls in, controls the East, and also every single country is going to control a part of Berlin. Again, France, Britain, and the United States will control West Berlin. Soviet Union will control East Berlin. Okay. And I have a map to show you. It'd be a lot easier if you all were here. I could show you the map on Google Maps, but I'm not gonna get out of the PowerPoint. Okay, so the democratic capitalist nations are going to control the West, and that's going to be a big theme within the Cold War. It's really going to be West versus East, and you'll be able to see that, while the Soviet Union occupies the East. Okay, now the Soviet Union did not want a united Germany. They had fought the Germans in World War I and been defeated, and Hitler had just thrown everything he had at them in World War II, and they did not want a united Germany, a strong Germany, and they wanted Germany to pay war reparations, much like Germany paid in World War I. Okay, and we're going to see the Soviet Union be very aggressive towards the Germans. They're going to dismantle the economy, especially in the East where they control, and they are going to take resources from Eastern Germany for themselves, okay? And so this is going to really start some of the tensions, all right? The United States is going to support Western Germany, and we are going to see the democratic nations, France, Britain, and the United States, learn from their past mistakes, as opposed to having this Treaty of Versailles, and this is something that's really important for us to compare and contrast. The United States, France, and Britain realize at this point in time that the Treaty of Versailles is what it was a main facilitator in the rise of fascism, the Great Depression, and the rise of Hitler. And so we are going to see these countries, as opposed to World War I, where we saw the Treaty of Versailles as a treaty of revenge, we're going to see reconciliation. We're going to see the United States, France, and Great Britain support Western Germany. Say, hey, we were beefing with each other, we just fought a war, let's help each other out, okay? And we're going to see the victors, France, Britain, and the United States, kind of extend an arm and pick up Western Germany and say, hey, we're friends now, okay? And part of the reason why they're doing this is because they've learned the lessons of World War One, but also because they need a strong Western Germany for the future Cold War. They realize the Soviets are being quite aggressive. Okay, so the United States is going to do this in a couple ways. They're going to really revive the economy of Western Germany with the Marshall Plan, which we're going to talk about, and they wanted Germany to be able to prevent radical groups from taking over, namely communists. They didn't want Germany to become fascist nor communist, and this is part of containment that we'll get into. Okay, and so this is Germany right here. We're going to see this is eventually going to be a new German nation, and we'll look at it on a map, but Germany's going to lose a lot more territory than they lost in World War I. And you can see the division of Germany. Here is the East, controlled by the Soviets. Here is the West, controlled by all of the allies, the democratic capitalist nations. All right, and this is going to be Western Germany, and we'll see Eastern Germany kind of come down this way. Okay, but Germany is divided again, and it's not going to be reunited until the Cold War ends. And so Germany, ladies and gentlemen, is actually kind of a brand new nation. It was created in the 1800s by OVB, the German Empire. It's going to get dismantled after World War II, and it's just recently, within my lifetime, I'm old, it has been reunited, the German Federation. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to start to see the Cold War start and some of the first early signs of tension, big time, between the West and the East, between the Soviets, the United States, and its allies. Okay? Now, the Soviets were very, very, very upset with the West supporting Germany, and they are going to attempt to kind of freeze the allies out of Berlin. Okay? They're going to really attempt to kick the allies out of Berlin so they can have control. And remember, if we go back, okay, every country, Great Britain, France, America, and Russia has a little section of Berlin. Well, Berlin is in the east, though. Okay, so what we're going to see is the Soviets try to freeze everybody out of Berlin, and they're going to close off all the roads and highways, and they can do that because they control Eastern Germany. All right, so what we're going to see is the Western powers, and this is where the Cold War really kind of defines the Cold War. They're going to be, the pettiness, right? This is so petty, all right? The West is going to be like, well, hey, if you close all the roads and everything, we're just simply we don't need roads. We'll just airlift supplies to Berlin. And this is showing the tension, okay, that the West is going to support, okay, democracy in the western part of Berlin, and the Soviets, there's going to be some fighting. Okay, they are, and this is really defining the Cold War, because it's really indirect fighting. Okay, this represents a very high tension point within the Cold War, possibly the official start. Okay, after about almost a year, the Soviets are going to give up. But this is, showing, hey, to the United States is telling the Soviet Union, hey, you need to back down, and the Soviets are saying, hey, we're here. We do not want your capitalism. We do not want your democracy. Okay, y'all been invading us. You need to back up. Okay, and we have some problems. And this was really, ladies and gentlemen, these emotions have been brewing for quite a long time. During World War II, the Soviets and our allies, the United States, Britain, France, very suspicious. They didn't trust each other, and that's been going back all the way into when that Archangel expedition in Murmansk during the Russian Civil War. These tensions, this idea of no trust between the two countries, it's been going on for quite a long time. Okay, and here's a picture of the Berlin airlift. Okay. And we're going to start to see a huge ideology of the Cold War, and it's called containment, okay? It was clear that Soviet expansion into Eastern Europe was a big Soviet goal, and they wanted to spread communism. And the United States is going to have a key doctrine in order to stop this, which is called containment, okay? And this is going to be the United States' policy, Britain's policy, France's policy, Western Germany's policy once it's kind of revived by the United States with the Marshall Plan. This is the Allies. This is the West. Okay, this is their way of trying to stop communism, which is to contain it. All right, don't let it spread. Okay, containment. That's the idea. Okay, and this is a huge departure from traditional United States policy. The United States is going to start entering into overseas alliances, start making commitments to anti-communist regimes, start entangling itself into the foreign policy all around the world. Now, this is very different, and you will learn more about this next year with APUSH, but this is a huge difference in for the United States. Traditionally, the United States, and this is going all the way back to George Washington, the first president of the United States. George Washington, the first president of the United States, warned against two main things in his farewell address. And Mr. Rodriguez, for my students, will learn this more next year. He'll tell you about that in APUSH. But George Washington said two things. He said, political parties are not good because the Constitution is not meant for it. Okay, and he said, the next thing he said, overseas alliances are bad. And the United States traditionally, up until the late 1700s, all the way until World War II, had never really entered in these huge permanent overseas alliances. Remember, after World War I, the United States was very reluctant to jump in there until the Lusitania, unrestricted submarine warfare. In World War II, the United States would not get involved in until Japan attacked them. So this is this idea of containment becoming an integral part of United States foreign policy that's very different from traditional United States foreign policy. Okay? And we're going to start to see the Truman Doctrine. And it's Harry Truman's cabinet, it's during his presidency that the United States comes up with containment. Okay? And the Truman Doctrine is an example of containment. The Truman Doctrine is a synonym for containment. It's pretty much the same thing. So we're going to start to see Truman in the United States facilitate containment and support anti-communist regimes. And a good example of this is in Greece and Turkey, where you had, in the post-war era, you had democratic and communist regimes fighting for power, and the United States is going to support the democratic groups that are trying to gain control. Okay, and that's a reason why we're going to see the United States get involved in the Vietnam War, the Korean War, get involved in some parts of the Middle East. It's containment. It's the idea of trying to prevent the spread of communism. And how do you do that? Well, you support the groups who are fighting against the communists. You support the democratic groups, okay, the capitalist groups. Okay, that's part of containment. Now, the Marshall Plan is key within containment. And one of the ways the United States wanted to kind of stop communism in Western Europe was economic aid. So this is part of containment, okay? And a good example of this is going to be in Western Germany. All right, the United States is going to say, hey, Western Germany, we do not want you to become fascist, but more importantly, we do not want you to become communist. And so we are going to give you a cool couple bill. All right, here's a whole bunch of money, billions of dollars, millions of dollars. Here's a whole bunch of money. And that's going to be really important, because if you give the people of Germany money, you're going to help the economy revive. If the economy revives, people are not so desperate. People are less likely to turn to radical political groups, to save them. Right? That's kind of what happened in World War I, in World War II. Right? Remember Germany, Great Depression. They were so disenchanted, so upset, and Hitler. They're going to put all their faith in Hitler, who then, obviously a very far right radical fascist, to kind of bring them stability. And so, what's the way to help stave off communism? We'll bring Western Europe stability. And so that's part of the Marshall Plan. Okay, it's going to provide lots of economic support, millions and billions of dollars to Western Europe. And by the way, $1 billion back then, was a lot of money. So there's, a cool mill. Okay, billions of dollars just going into Western Europe. And this all has a plan. All right, the plan is to fight off communism. Okay, so the United States invited the Soviets and many of their new satellite states that are communist, like Poland, Finland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, but the Soviet Union is going to refuse. Okay, this is going to facilitate a quick economic turnaround for Western Europe and help stop communism from taking hold. Okay, and this is really also going to further inflame tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union is not happy that the United States is actively trying to prevent communism from spreading, and the United States is not happy with the Soviet Union for trying to spread it. And so there's clear tension going on between the two countries. Okay, and during the Cold War, ladies and gentlemen, We're going to see the United States and the Soviet Union. This is going to be a big theme of just fighting, indirectly. Okay, and there is Harry Truman, and this occurred during his presidency. Okay, we're going to stop right here, ladies and gentlemen, and continue our lecture a little bit later.